So 8th grade, here's what you need for ancient history today. You need your homework. We're going to review that first of all. And then we're going to write some brand new notes in our binder over Mesopotamia. So notice we're hopping around. We were in Mesopotamia, and then we traveled to Egypt, and today we're going back to Mesopotamia. So as you can see, we're going to review our homework first, which was our closed notes over chapters 1 and 2. So I provided the notes for you. You simply read the chapter and then filled in the missing content as your notes. So we'll review that. That will be for a grade, by the way. So we have chapter 1 and chapter 2 that will be graded in class today. Now, following that, we'll get into Hammurabi's Code. And in Hammurabi's Code, what we're going to do is get to see some of the rules that he had in his kingdom, in the kingdom of Babylon, which you hear in God's Word quite a bit. So we'll examine his code, and then, of course, I'll introduce Friday's homework for you. And we're going to continue following Abraham and his journeys. So we know that he went to Egypt, but we're going to follow him back to the land of Canaan and back to basically the Mesopotamian or Fertile Crescent region. All right, yes?
Do you kind of have a schedule with your homework, like notes will be on Wednesdays and like Bible reading and that kind of stuff, but your questions will be on Friday?
Basically, all the at-home days tend to be days where you're interacting with some reading. And then the in-class days are more notes geared or activity geared. So that's kind of how I organize it. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and get out our homework over the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. On the first side, or front side, you had chapter 1. On the back side, you had chapter 2. So we'll review those in class together and see how you... All right, so now then we are switching gears. We just looked at our homework, but now we're switching to Hammurabi. Now, so we've started in the land of Mesopotamia. We started in the Fertile Crescent, and we kind of followed Abraham. As Abraham moved to Canaan and then moved to Egypt, we followed him to Egypt, didn't we? And we learned about ancient Egypt. Well, now God's going to have Abram move back. So as he's moving back, we're going to move back. And we're going to go back to the Fertile Crescent, in this region specifically. And we're going to look at an empire that begins rising, the nation or empire of Babylonia, the Babylonian Empire. So we're going to specifically focus in on one mighty king and ruler of the Babylonian Empire. Today we're going to look at Hammurabi and Hammurabi's code or laws that he developed. I think you'll find them quite interesting. All right, so go ahead and make sure your new binder entry is ready. Like I said, our title is Hammurabi. We have some notes that we need to record over him and his code. So there we go. Now then, as you know, the Sumerians ruled over Mesopotamia, also known as the Fertile Crescent. And over time, other empires began popping up and coming to power as well. One of those is the empire of Babylonia, or Babylon. Now, you've probably heard Babylon referenced in the Old Testament. It's referenced many times in the Old Testament. The Babylonians are spoken of in God's Word. And they're also called the Chaldeans. So, when you're reading God's Word, if you hear the Babylonians or the Chaldeans, just know this is Hammurabi's empire. One of the most famous leaders of Babylon is Hammurabi. As you can see on the screen, you can see the years that he ruled the Babylonian Empire.
Well, I thought that was just how long the Babylonians were.
No, the Babylonian Empire was much longer, but then he's one of the key rulers of Babylon. And these are the years that he would have ruled. Now, in 1901, we made a great discovery. In a land called Susa, an ancient Babylonian city, archaeologists unearthed something quite unique. It was an 8-foot-tall stone monument. And on this 8-foot-tall stone monument, at the top, was this image here. And this image is a picture of King Hammurabi seated on his throne, and he's speaking with a god. Of course, you guys know it's paganism, but he's speaking with this god, and this god gives him a code. Laws to rule his land by. And Hammurabi is most famous for this. His focus in his empire was upon justice, to rule his people and to rule with peace and justice. You hear that a lot, even in today, don't you? In fact, those terms came up in the presidential debate recently. Land of law and order. So, on this giant 8-foot stone is written laws. Laws of Hammurabi's empire. And of course, what language would this be? What's that? Not Egyptian. We've moved from the Egyptian empire back to Mesopotamia, right? Cuneiform, yes. So on this giant 8-foot tall stone structure, written in cuneiform, are 282 laws of the Babylonian Empire. And there you can see it pictured. 282 laws. And here you can see the 8-foot tall stone statue, and then here the cuneiform writing. We've zoomed in on that here for you.
How can they even write that small? 282?
Now that in this code, or in this law, Hammurabi focused on practical things, practical laws for practical interactions in society. So for example, there were standards regarding trading. How should trade occur in his kingdom? Also, how should family disputes be handled? What about land deals? When you're selling land, when you're purchasing land, how should that go? There are also laws regarding military service, or how to take out debts and pay off loans. There were even laws regarding witchcraft and how to handle witchcraft. Of course, we know they worship pagans, so to us it's all kind of pagan, right? But he had a way of handling witchcraft in his kingdom. Now, as a king, Hammurabi also worked on taxation. So his law included details about how to tax his people. And did you know there was even a law regarding minimum wage? So the whole concept of minimum wage, which we deal with in our culture today, was even in this code. Interesting, isn't it? So he made many laws regarding things that we have laws about in America today. So, would you like to get introduced to some of his laws?
Yes. I have a question.
All right, yes, what's your question?
Why? So I know in this pillar statue thingy,
Hmm?
that Hammurabi is talking to Marduk, correct?
Yes. Yes, Marduk is the supposed god of justice. Yep.
Why do they think that Marduk would have given this to Hammurabi?
Well, back then, you wanted your ruler to be well esteemed, right? Remember the pharaohs, eventually they were turned into gods. They were worshipped as God.
Question, how would he even get this if Marduk isn't real?
Right, how did he really
How
get
would
it?
they
Well,
even get it?
Who made it up?
so we know it's his own law, right? So these are Hammurabi's laws that he made for his land and for his empire. And of course, he wants to attribute that to a higher power.
Why do you think the Ten Commandments are the Ten Commandments?
But we know that was the true living God, right? Big difference in the Ten Commandments
Yeah,
there.
but like it's the same concept in a way. She's like, why would you even believe it? Why would you believe the Ten Commandments?
Right. Okay, so let's examine some of his 282 laws. We're not going to look at all of them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw 6 at you, okay? But what I want to do is introduce you to these 6, and then you just think of what would you do if you were Hammurabi? So in other words, someone does something that's breaking the law. What would your consequence or punishment be? What do you think would be fair and just in these 6 situations, okay? So in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring around a handout for you. On the front side, it gives you kind of a recap or summary of Hammurabi and Hammurabi's code. It also gives you some examples of some of his laws. But we're going to look at 6 specifically here in class. So you can have this resource, you can put this in your notes. And for those of you joining us online, I will post this along with our class video. That way you have access to it as well. So you can put that in your binder notes.
Do you want us to read these ones?
All right. In fact, let's look at, how about one of you guys just read just this top portion for us, okay? Introduce us to Hammurabi a little bit more. Okay. So let's look at Hammurabi's code. And I'm going to just take 6 examples, okay? So 6 laws that he had. And what I'll do is just kind of pose them to you, and you think of what might be a fair and just consequence.
There's 6 of us.
And then we'll see what his punishment would have been. All right, so situation number 1. Let's pretend you hire a carpenter to build you and your family a home. But unfortunately, this carpenter builds a home that's not very stable. And as a result, the home falls on your family and one of your family members is killed. What should happen to the carpenter?
I would
Sue them?
Or
For money? Okay, you think that's a just?
or put them in prison.
Okay.
according
Prison?
to him, put them to death.
Depending on,
Whoa.
According to him, Robert.
Death?
We need to throw them in the river with.
Okay, so rule number 229 in Hammurabi's code states that if a builder builds a house for someone and it is not constructed properly, and the house falls, killing any member of the home, then that builder shall also be put to death.
it's almost all the solutions death. I think you should have like.
No, you want to
There's a lot of death in his
No,
code.
you want to know what my favorite one is? Number 2 on here.
All right. Here's the second one. This is separate from what's on your paper, okay? Let's say a child and his father get into an argument, and the child gets physical with his father. Maybe slaps his dad or hits his dad. What should happen to that son?
He'd be grounded.
Lost their hands off.
Grounded, life in prison.
I haven't,
According to Hammurabi's code, Rule 195, that child's hand gets chopped off.
Oh, I guess
What?
it.
Wow.
What is wrong with them?
wait, like, why,
All right.
why is this?
If we had that in today's culture, people might mind their parents a little bit more. No.
Why is he, involved in family affairs?
So basically, they had civil courts set up just like we have civil courts set up as well. So, and then he had his code of law.
What law was
Bringing the son to
Right.
court for that?
And actually, Hammurabi, we know that you're assumed innocent before proven guilty, which actually is how our system works, right? So we know that his system used that. So they did have court.
That's why we.
All right, so situation number 3. Sorry, we're kind of running out of time.
What was the second law? Like, what was
The second one I gave you was the son.
Yeah,
If
like
the
what
son,
number of law was that?
that was rule number 195.
Okay.
All right, rule 143 under Hammurabi's code. All right, what should be done about a wife who ignores her duties in the house and embarrasses her husband? Ooh.
Oh, that's
She
definitely
becomes a
death.
slave.
That's definitely death.
Probably put to death.
Put-
That's what he's gonna say.
All right, according to Rule 143 in Hammurabi's code, if the woman's not doing her duties in the home and belittling her husband, then she shall be thrown into the river.
What if she can? Yeah, what if she can swim out?
They might have some stones tied to her.
Oh.
Oh, oh my
Apparently
goodness,
drowning
whoa.
is the most peaceful
All right.
death, though. No.
So,
Yeah, if
those were only 3.
You're,
3 examples. You have some more examples on your handout. So you can see
The sorcery one.
the code of Hammurabi was pretty strict, wasn't it? Would you guys like to live in his empire?
no.
All right. If you did, you would be very well behaved, wouldn't you? Don't get out of line in his empire. All right, guys, don't forget you have Friday homework. Your Friday homework is to follow Abraham as he comes back to Canaan. All right.